Look, any crime committed by an illegal alien is a preventable crime, right? A lot of them are not here for the right reasons, and a lot of them here will offend and take these actions like we see with Lincoln Riley, Rachel Morin, and there's dozens of others, right? These are just the ones that we hear about, but there are victims every single day across the country, and it's a shame because it doesn't have to happen.
Keeping our republic is on the line, and it requires patriots with great passion, dedication, and eternal vigilance to preserve our freedoms. Jenny Beth Martin is the co-founder of Tea Party Patriots. She is an author, a filmmaker, and one of Time Magazine's most influential people in the world. But the title she is most proud of is mom to her boy-girl twins. She has been at the forefront, fighting to protect America's core principles for more than a decade. Welcome to the Jenny Beth Show.
In today's episode, I'm joined by Chad Wolf, former acting United States Secretary of Homeland Security. We'll be diving into the crisis at America's southern border, examining the policies that have contributed to this situation, and discussing what it will take to keep our nation secure and protect our communities. Check out this critical conversation. Chad, thank you so much for joining me today.
Well, happy to be here. Thanks for the invitation.
So you were the acting Homeland Security Secretary, and right now, when you were working for President Trump, the border was secure, but right now it is wide open, and we are seeing so many different problems with it. In your professional opinion, what do you think are the worst problems that are happening right now today?
Well, I think what we've seen, right, we saw when President Biden and Vice President Harris came into power in 2021, they took 94 executive actions in the first 100 days that made the border, as you indicated, a very secure border, and they turned it into a very unsecure border. And so it's a lot of those policy decisions that need to be reversed, right? We've been begging them for 3 years to reverse those policy decisions. And what are those, right? They canceled Remain in Mexico. They canceled our asylum cooperative agreements. They stopped building border wall. They stopped removing individuals from the country. All of these things serve as pull factors. And what do I mean by that? These are all actions that the cartels and the smugglers and the traffickers are looking at to say, look, now's the easier time to smuggle and to traffic individuals across the border because they will remain in the United States. Under President Trump, that wasn't the case, right? We had Remain in Mexico. We were removing individuals, and so fewer and fewer people were coming because the last thing that you want to do is to give a trafficker or a smuggler $10,000, $20,000 only to be removed back to your home country that you just came from, right? That's not a very wise investment. And so that's what we were trying to do under the Trump administration is to deter people from making this very dangerous journey, abusing the asylum system, which is what we've seen over these past 3.5, almost 4 years now. And this is what is ongoing, right? So the Biden administration, they reinstituted the catch and release policy, which is just disastrous. They don't remove anyone from the country. They let people abuse the asylum system. They're giving unchecked and almost unfettered parole access to millions of illegal aliens, actually flying individuals into the country today. And so all of these things add up to a very unsecure border, mass number of illegal aliens coming across the border. And so it's a very long answer to a very simple question is what should be done today to secure the border, and it's almost exactly the opposite of what the policies of the Biden-Harris administration are, or what they currently are. We need to go back to policies that work, whether that's the Trump administration, the Obama administration, or the Bush administration, whatever it might be. Policies that work to deter the illegal crossings, that protect Americans, that protect American communities, and provide some integrity to the immigration system.
Chad, when you say the word trafficking, why do you use that word rather than just people who are coming here to seek a better life because their country is so hard? How is it that these kind of policies that we've seen from the Biden-Harris administration actually cause trafficking and inhuman slavery?
Yeah, absolutely. Look, any alien coming across that southern border is having to pay one of 4 cartels that operate along that southern border that control that territory in northern Mexico. They have more control over that border, I say, than our Border Patrol, at least when you look at the number of miles across that border. And so any individual, regardless of your intentions or regardless of why you're coming to the United States or want to come illegally, you're having to pay a cartel member to smuggle or traffic you across that border, depending on your intentions. So that's why I use that term. In many cases, they are trafficking individuals across that border because some of these individuals don't have the money to pay the cartel members. Depending on where you come from dictates how much that you have to pay them. If you're coming from Mexico or Central America, it's a little bit less than if you're coming from China or other parts of the world. Some of these individuals don't have that money, and so you get trafficked across the border, and then you go to work paying off your cartel member and your cartel to pay that debt. We talk about the women that are abused along this journey that get sold into sex slavery, the children that get abused along this journey as well. And so I'm very intentional in what I say because a large portion of these individuals are being trafficked. When you have over 500,000 children in the last 3.5 to 4 years come across that border with no parent, no guardian, no adult, no one with them, every single one of them are being trafficked by a cartel member into the United States, now for different purposes. But they are all being trafficked. And so I think it's really important to call this out, right? Because what the left will have you believe that it's only women and children coming to the border for a better life. And while that may be true, that is not the only individuals crossing that border. There is a large segment of criminals, national security threats, and individuals that don't like America, don't like Americans, and are here to do some harm one way or another. And that's very important to keep in mind because this is about border security. This is about national sovereignty. This is about understanding, knowing who comes across our border, where did they come from, who are they, where do they want to go, and how did they get here. All of these things are critically important, and you've got to let law enforcement do their job. If you come across legally, we're okay with you because we've already vetted you. We already understand who you are. But if you want to come to the country and the first thing that you do is to break our laws, well, there needs to be some consequence to that. So that's why it's important, whether you're trafficked, whether you're smuggled, those are differences. It's really important that we let law enforcement deal with you one way or another.
And one of the things that I've noticed from people who don't understand the issue or haven't visited the border and haven't seen the problems firsthand like you and I have, and of course you have much more experience with it than I do, is that they really do think, well, we just want them to have a better life. They're only coming here to have a better life. Well, I want people to have a better life as well, and I don't want them to be abused in their quest to have a better life. And it seems to me that the policies that we have right now, currently with the Biden-Harris administration, are actually empowering the cartels and others to take advantage of the people and to abuse them in a way that would not happen if we had a much more lawful and orderly process to enter the country.
Well, I think you're exactly right. I would say that over the last 3.5 to 4 years, this is the most inhumane border security and immigration policy system ever devised, ever set up, because it's just encouraging more and more individuals to come here. One, that will never qualify for asylum, right? The numbers bear this out. The numbers are on the DHS website. Between 85 and 87% of individuals will never qualify for asylum. So you're basically telling them to come, you're allowing them into the country, you're allowing them to build a life here, only to get told by an immigration judge maybe 5 years later, you have no legal right to be in the United States and you must remove yourself, right? They don't remove themselves. They go into the shadows. It becomes very difficult for them in the long run. That's not how our immigration system should work. We should be giving people asylum protections early in the system, early in the process, I should say, that truly need it. So we've got to get rid of the fraud, identify who needs those protections under U.S. law, give them the protections early on, but then disincentivize individuals from coming here that don't have a legal right to be here. We also need to keep in mind that people are venue shopping. We just call it what it is, right? You have people all over the world coming to the United States, coming to the southern border, claiming asylum. The United States is not the only country in the world that you can claim asylum in, right? This idea is around the world is you're supposed to seek asylum in the first safe third country that you can get to. And if you're from China, United States is not the first safe country that you can get to. but yet people, that's where they want to come. And so they're claiming asylum and they're venue shopping. And we've got to get away from that. Haitians that have been in Brazil for 10 years then come to the border and claim asylum from Haiti. Even though they've been in Brazil for 5 or 10 years, they're still claiming asylum from their time in Haiti. We've got to get rid of that. That's just, it's blatant abuse. The Biden and Harris team know this. They don't care. They put policies that incentivize this. And so you got to get back to the fundamentals of what is U.S. immigration law, what is border security, and let's hold people feet to the fire. Let's make sure that we give people a chance that need U.S. protections under our asylum or refugee laws, but let's also hold people accountable that will never qualify for them, and so that we disincentivize this very dangerous journey that we see horrible results from, and we get people closer to their home country, we get them safe, and we allow conditions in their home country to improve, and then they are able to return.
What qualifies one for asylum versus the problem that we have today where so many do not qualify for it?
Yeah, it's very specific under U.S. law. There's about 5 different categories that you can qualify for. And a lot of people just think like your country's unsafe, right? So if Guatemala or Honduras or Costa Rica or really any country in the world, people will say, well, there's gangs in that country and they live in a very dangerous neighborhood and they wanted to escape from that. That is not a basis for asylum. You cannot do that. You have to be being persecuted by your home government itself, not just it's dangerous. There's many dangerous neighborhoods in the United States that you probably don't want to find yourself in. That's not a basis for asylum. And so it's very, very important, and we certainly tried to do this during my time during the Trump administration at DHS, is to educate people what is asylum and what is not. Because you're probably getting told by the cartels and the other traffickers and smugglers that you can qualify for asylum if you live in a dangerous neighborhood, if you've maybe been a victim of crime in that neighborhood, that you will qualify for asylum in the United States. Odds are you will never qualify for asylum. It's very, very specific under U.S. law, and that's why only 10 to 12% of people actually qualify once they see an immigration judge. And look, the cartels and the smugglers know this. They don't care. They don't care about people. They don't care about these migrants. All they see is a paycheck there, and they will do anything to get them across that border. So once you start enforcing the law, once you start educating people what qualifies, once people start seeing that they'll be turned away, they'll stop making that very dangerous journey, and you'll see different results.
Chad, in the beginning, you talked about several things that Biden did in his first 100 days of office that created a pull factor. How does that work with border security, where there's a pull factor, but when you're not doing certain things, it discourages people from entering illegally?
Sure. Again, you can do a number of different things, right? So if you are on the campaign trail that we saw in 2020, where they talked about allowing anyone and everyone to come in, giving them free health care, those are pull factors. Those are reasons that are pulling illegal aliens to the United States because you're offering them something, right? The left often talks about amnesty, right? That's a pathway to citizenship for people that have came here illegally, broken the law, in many instances have no legal right to be here, and yet you're still saying, you came here illegally, you broke our law, but we're okay with that. And just come on in because we'll give you amnesty. These are things that the left talks about quite often, that they understand this. It's not that they don't. It's not that they're dumb. They understand this. These are pull factors that will continue to allow you to come in. Temporary protective status, which is a very niche immigration term that we use. You give someone TPS status, which they've done for Haitians quite extensively, and Venezuelans. More and more people will come because they want that same status, the ability to work here in the United States. All of these things are pull factors. They're pulling illegal aliens here, whether you want them here or not, because they're saying, look, if I can get to the border under the Biden-Harris administration, I'll get picked up by Border Patrol, I'll be given water, food, a place to stay, I'll be processed within 72 hours, and I'll be released to go anywhere I want to in the United States. And oftentimes, I'll get handed an airline ticket, a train ticket, or a bus ticket by taxpayer dollars to go wherever I want. Well, who wouldn't want that? And so these are all pull factors that we talk about that you've got to eliminate, and you've got to get back to the rule of law in implementing border security law, immigration enforcement. The administration in the first 100 days said, we're going to put a 100-day moratorium on any removals, no removals from the country, and that includes criminal aliens. And that's crazy. Again, that just is another pull factor, another incentive to come here, because you're thinking to yourself, maybe that's not instituted today, but maybe it will be in the future under a new Biden or a new Harris administration. Maybe they'll have even crazier ideas that will allow me to stay in the United States. So these are all things, every time there's a decision made by the Biden administration or the Harris team, these are things that the smugglers and the traffickers start advertising, and they start incentivizing people to come to take advantage of.
How does this, when we think of Homeland Security, especially if you're a little bit older than maybe just someone who's first voting, or these are the first few election cycles that they're voting, we remember 9/11, and the Department of Homeland Security was set up after 9/11. How does securing the border bleed in or overlap with the other kind of work that the Department of Homeland Security has to do?
Well, it's two ways to answer that. It's very, it's at the heart of what the department does, and it's also very different than a lot of other elements of the department, right? After 9/11, you had DHS stood up in 2003, so about a year and a half after the tragic events of 9/11/01, and it was supposed to pull together all the different parts of the federal government that had a responsibility and a job to protect the homeland, one way or another, to protect the homeland. And obviously, when you talk about border security, it's talking about protecting our borders. That's obviously with Border Patrol along our southern and northern borders, but it's also the Coast Guard along our maritime borders. And it's also USCIS and other folks that are understanding who's coming legally into the country, making sure we vet them, making sure that they're not coming from a country of concern, that they're fraudulent passports being used. So it's all of these different factors that impact the security of the homeland. Now, DHS also does emergency management, FEMA, making sure that Americans here at home are protected from hurricanes and natural disasters, wildfires, and things of that nature. There's cybersecurity of what DHS does, as well as a variety of other missions. So the department's pretty large. It's the third largest department in the federal government, over 260,000 employees. And so the mission is diverse, but at the core of what DHS does is that border security and immigration enforcement mission. And so whether it's illegal aliens coming or it's legal aliens coming into airports, into seaports, making sure that who shows up there is being properly vetted, screened, and allowed into the country. This idea that we allow whoever to come into our country hardly vetted is very unique. No other country does this in the world except the United States. And it's because of massive loopholes in our laws, laws that Congress really should fix. But if they don't, the executive branch, and we certainly did this under President Trump, has an obligation to remedy and to put measures in place that protect Americans and American communities.
Would people when they're listening to this, I think most of my audience understands the problem, but there may be people who are listening right now because the election is happening and they are not completely familiar with the problem. When you're talking about, I just want to attest to something that I have witnessed as I've traveled around the country. When you talk about how this administration, the current administration, is putting people onto planes and shipping them or flying them to other parts of the country. I have witnessed this happening, especially when I'm in Phoenix or San Antonio, and maybe a little bit also out of San Diego. I've seen people who are walking through that airport who seem to be brand new people in America. And I say that because of the things they're traveling with. Usually they'll have like a phone and a cord for the phone and some papers in a Ziploc bag. And that's pretty much all they're traveling with. They're not like the American travelers who have special water bottles and backpacks and rolling suitcases. They're traveling with just the things on their body. And it's just, For a while there, I think that this happened before they started flying people across the border into the country. There were just so many people, especially in the Phoenix airport, every single time that I went through. And it's alarming because I don't think most of them are being vetted. One time I saw a group of people, and they looked to be children, minors, and there must have been about a dozen of them. And there were 2 adults with them, and the adults looked to be like they had supplies to travel and things to travel. The rest of the kids didn't look like they had very much at all with them. It's kind of heartbreaking to think they've left their family, they're here in this country, and I don't know what's happening to them. And we've heard that this administration has lost track of over 300,000 minors who have come here. Even if people want to be kind and want to be compassionate, what's happening right now as it plays out in real time winds up not being kind to the people who are trying to come here.
Well, I think it's an important point, right? And this is what the left tries to tell the American people every day, which is if you turn anyone away, if you remove anyone from the country, then somehow you're not compassionate, that you're somehow mean-spirited, right? And it's simply not the case, because the flip side of that coin is what you see today, is you letting almost anyone in, and they're getting abused along the way. They're getting sold a bill of goods that they can remain here in the United States, when that is not going to be the case for a large percentage of them, unless Congress gives them amnesty, which the left is obviously pushing very, very strongly. And so you're exactly right. A trained observer can understand who these folks are. They're flying out of the Southwest, along that Southwest border, out of Phoenix and Tucson and El Paso, Brownsville, San Diego, and other airports, and you see them in the airports all the time. And this is the direct result, right? If your policy, which has been the policy of the Biden and Harris administration, is not to deter illegal crossings, but it's to actually facilitate it. It's facilitated and process them as quickly as possible, right? Because early on in the administration, if you think back to 21 and to 2022, the administration took a lot of criticism because there was large numbers of individuals waiting under bridges in Del Rio and other places along the border because they were congregating, because so many were coming over so quickly. And people would look at these images saying, how terrible is all this? Well, the numbers haven't really decreased. They've just gotten better at processing them so that there's not long lines. And so if there's no pictures to take, to have out there, well, then there must not be a crisis. And that's not the case. It's just that this administration's policy is let me process individuals as quickly as possible into the country, right? It's why they developed the CBP-1 app, right? Is for people to get on that app, to process them, to get a reservation, to get across a port of entry. It's why they instituted the CHNV parole program, right? So no longer do you have to come to the southern border. We'll just fly you directly from Venezuela, Haiti, Cuba, or Nicaragua directly into the United States. We're going to speed the process up quicker and quicker and quicker. And that's what they've done, and the programs go on and on and on of what they've done over the last 3.5 to 4 years. So if your goal is to process people in here as quickly as possible, the Biden and Harris administration is executing on that precisely. But if your goal here is to actually deter illegal behavior, and it's to deter people that will never qualify for U.S. protections, such as asylum protections, then you have a different set of policies in place. But what you see today in airports around the country, we hear about it almost on a daily basis, is an unprecedented number of individuals coming into the country. And I'll leave you with this fact. It took almost 70 years to process the number of legal aliens coming through Ellis Island than it has in almost 4 years of the number of illegal aliens. It's almost the same number, and that's about 12 million. It's almost the same number. And so it gives you a size and a scale of what has actually been occurring over these last 3.5 to 4 years.
That is a striking number, 40 years versus 4 years for the same number of people. As we step a bit further away from the border and look at the rest of the country, we've seen it seems like almost every single week there is a new incident where somebody has been harmed or murdered or killed by someone who has entered the country illegally. And perhaps they entered and did what the government told them to do, but our own government is empowering them, enabling them to break the laws as they enter, because it is in violation of our law for them to be here. We saw that happen with Laken Riley. And Laken Riley, I heard about what happened to Laken Riley before her name was known. I happened to glance an alert on Twitter that something, or X, that a young woman was missing on the campus of University of Georgia. That's where I went to school, and I knew my kids had friends who were at UGA. So I kind of reached out to a few parents and said, hey, there's something weird going on at UGA. A few hours later, we learned more and learned that Laken Riley is the person who is missing, and that she was brutally murdered by someone who never should have been in this country here at all, and yet he killed her. And I am fighting right now. Part of the reason that I'm working so hard to try to make a difference in the upcoming election is in her memory. As I learned more about her, I never knew her and I don't know her parents, but she lived down the street from us in the same area of Cherokee County, Georgia, as my kids did. They were a year younger than her, and they had the exact same first grade teacher that she had. It hit really close to home, and it's hitting close to home for so many people now across the country. One of the things that really bothers me is when I hear things still coming out of Vice President Harris saying that these are undocumented people. The person who allegedly killed Laken Riley was well documented. They knew who he was. He'd been arrested, let out of jail, and was able to be here in this country, able to go free even after breaking additional laws. And he did something brutal to her. I'm sure you've seen a lot of things like this and talked to a lot more families than I have. It's so angering and maddening, because you realize that it's hurting American citizens as much as it hurts some of the people who are making this very dangerous journey to come into our country.
Well, that's right, and I think it's important. They're not undocumented. Many of them, as you indicated, have documents. They're just not U.S. documents, and a lot of them, we see this, discard those documents before they cross the border because they don't want the authorities, they don't want Border Patrol and ICE and other law enforcement to know who they are. And that could be for a variety of different reasons. Some do come over with documentation, but a large percentage do not. So this idea that they're undocumented, right, it's supposed to soften the fact that they have broken U.S. law. The first thing they've done is to come over illegally, which is a crime. So we need to call it what it is and don't say they're undocumented or newcomers, right, which is what the Biden-Harris team likes to call them, newcomers. Again, they're illegal aliens. They've come here illegally, and the term of law in the Immigration and Naturalization Act is they're in fact an alien, because that confers a certain set of benefits and rights that they have. So let's just be very clear on what they are, because it's important. But absolutely, look, any crime committed by an illegal alien is a preventable crime, right? They shouldn't have been here. They shouldn't have been released into the country to offend and to do whatever it is that they might do. It's important to remember a lot of these folks that come here come from different cultures, different societies, where perhaps beating up on a woman or treating your fellow, citizens is okay. Like you can get into fights without any consequences. You can beat up someone without any consequences, right? It's a different culture here in the United States. And I'm not saying that they can kill people without any repercussions, but in some of these countries, that is in fact what happens, right? You're not held to the same U.S. standards that you are in some other countries. And so there are some societal differences here. And for a lot of people that grow up in the United States, you know right from wrong. That's not to say that we still don't have crime here. Of course we do. And some of these other folks just don't come in with the same set of values. And that's what I get back to, understanding who's coming into the country and for what reason and why are they here. really, really important, instead of just allowing anyone who shows up at that southern border to come here because they say the magic word, because they say I'm in fear of my life, or they say I was beat up in my home country, or whatever it is that they might do. A lot of them are not here for the right reasons, and a lot of them here will offend and take these actions, like we see with Lincoln Riley, Rachel Morin, and there's dozens of others, right? These are just the ones that we hear about, but there are victims every single day across the country, and it's a shame because it doesn't have to happen.
So if you could fix things yourself, what are the top things that you would do to solve the problem?
Yeah, there's a number of different things, right? I think you have to demonstrate to the cartels and to the smugglers that you're not going to have business as usual, right? They run these multinational, they're almost like corporations, right? And like any corporation or big business, they want continuity, and that's what the Biden and Harris team has given them for 4 years. So I would continue to mix policies up on the border, making sure that there's an immigration consequence for anyone that crosses that border that never will qualify for asylum or any other protections under law. I would make sure that we're removing people, again, sending the signal that it's not okay just to come here to abuse our laws, that there's accountability for your actions. These are all things that we need to do. We need to empower our Border Patrol agents to deter illegal crossings and not just watch them come over. We need to build the remaining sections of the border wall so that they have that impedance and denial, so it would make it more difficult. There's a number of things that need to be done. We need to partner with the state of Texas instead of suing the state of Texas like the Biden-Harris team have done for almost the past 3 years. And we need just a different mentality here that we brought during the Trump administration, that I'm hopeful, should he get elected, that we'll be back for another 4 years.
Chad, how can people find out more about the work that you're doing, and how can they follow you on social media?
Yeah, absolutely. If you go to AmericaFirstPolicy.com, that's AFPI, America First Policy Institute, and you'll go there and you can obviously just put in the search tab myself or Homeland Security or Immigration or Border Security. We've got a lot of different things that we've written about. We do a number of fact sheets, and our fact sheets are designed to just educate people. So when you hear something, a lot of the fact sheets are set up as truth versus fact or myth versus fact, right? It's when the Biden team says they've removed more individuals in the last year than all of Trump administration, right? That's crazy. And so we just give you the facts to say that's not true, and we cite all of our information, mostly to the DHS website. And so we just give you the facts, but we talk about solutions they should be doing. So a lot of videos on there, a lot of presentations on there as well. So AmericaFirstPolicy.com. You can also find me on X and other places as well.
Well, thank you so much for joining me today. Thanks for everything that you did to help keep our country safe and our borders secure, and I hope you have the opportunity to do that again in the future.
Well, I appreciate it, and thanks for having me on. It's been great.
Thank you.
The Jenny Beth Show is hosted by Jenny Beth Martin, produced by Kevin Mooneyhan, and directed by Luke Livingston. The Jenny Beth Show is a production of Tea Party Patriots Action. For more information, visit teapartypatriots.org.
If you like this episode, let me know by hitting the like button or leaving a comment or a 5-star review. And if you want to be the first to know every time we drop a new episode, be sure to subscribe and turn on notifications for whichever platform you're listening on. If you do these simple things, it will help the podcast grow, and I'd really appreciate it. Thank you so much.